Down off in here, Panther Point, Panther Lake, Swan Lake area, off all this down here in San Antonio Bay. We've been in the Big Moon, and the Big Moon has paid dividends for us, especially when you're fishing in and around that. That moon rise and the moon set has been very, very productive for us. Primarily baits that we have been throwing in and around that has been the burner shads in multiple different flavors, soft dines, a few different flavors in that. Whatever you have, you can be fine with that. It's just the profile has been very good, catching some very solid trout, lots of redfish, sprinkled in flounder here or there. But this whole area down here, getting inside of Panther Lake, backside of Swan, back in this area here, working the shorelines on the outside all the way down to Cedar Lake and Twin Lake, if you so choose. Those have been very productive. You've got little lake areas, little back lake mouths and stuff that dump off into San Antonio Bay area. We've been fishing those guts. We've had higher tides in the mornings, and then that tide really starts to drop out as we transition toward the afternoon. Again, that moon set minor has been very good, and as we tapered away from that and that water starting to drop, as you hit the moon under major would be just about peaked out at the low tides, and you really hit those guts up and down the shoreline, all the way down to Cedar. All these areas have been good. If you get back up in this way, as you head back toward Cottonwood, you got multiple back lake mouths that dump out into that. And every one of those had some fish that were holding in it to some degree. Were they all good or great fish? No, not always. But, we would stop, fish those areas for a little while, especially as the moon set would be trending away from us. That bite continued to taper off. So we try to really pinpoint around the feeding periods, the major under, the moon rise. Of course, the moon over at this time frame would be middle of the dark or middle of the night, so you weren't really fishing that unless you're just fishing at night time. But anyway, again, all these areas here have been very productive for us. Throwing the burner shads in Purple Rain, Twisted Tea, White Ice, all those have been very good. Chicken of the Sea. Depending on what the water clarity is, we threw a little bit of firecracker in mud minnow as well. The knock and tail in the watermelon red, which is a 3 1/4 inch bait, which was really good and productive as well. The soft dines is really good, productive. XL, ever so often we would throw it, or have somebody would throw one in some of these deeper guts in here just to work that, and we'd pull out some decent fish. Haven't really caught anything super great so far into the new year, but we've caught solid fish, and that's the main objective there is locate and try to figure them out inside of that areas. So as we transition away from the Big Moon moving forward up in this upcoming week, again, you'll be fishing in the wild card days, so you'll have to have multiple different sizes and flavors just to see what the fish want, and they'll dictate to you what they want to eat and what profile size. But get out there and work those areas. Pay attention to what your upcoming weather and winds and stuff are doing. Again, make sure you're fishing around the majors and minors to be productive in your days. Off of Paul's Mott area down into Long Reef Bend, I've mentioned these in videos before, but this whole area, especially right now, with the Big Moon in place, higher tides in the mornings, lower tides in the afternoons, both of these areas, or these areas in general, have held fish. And they've lent fish to you in just different points and times of the day. So you could be out here early in the morning with a little bit higher tide, and that tide is running out, just kind of time frame as that moon was dropping. Bait was pretty active up on the shoreline. Those guts, all the back lake mouths guts that was there was bait that was hanging off into those. Some of those areas were pretty active. And one thing that we kind of noticed there is when you're fishing these guts, there's not going to be fish in every one of them. So that's the one thing that you have to understand, that you pick you one that's got a lot of, it's got the structure, it's got some bait working in it or around the mouth of it, or maybe even back up in there, and you work it. You work your baits in there. Again, we've been throwing the burner shads around the Big Moon. The smaller profile baits has been very productive for us. And it really didn't matter in these areas what particular flavor that we threw. It just we tried a bunch of different ones and to see what was going to be the most productive. So it was pretty much the same all across the board. They wanted the smaller profile bait, and the color really didn't have a whole lot of effect on the fish whatsoever. So as we worked these guts, we'd find some fish in some, we wouldn't find some in the others. We'd find some in the transition areas in between the guts. We'd work those areas really well with the burner shads, with the knock and tail lures, the jerk shrimp from marker 54, just free lining that, bouncing that off the edge. Because out here on this edge, you got all those duck blinds that are along that shoreline, so there's a little bit of a drop. Just out, it's very subtle. If you walk it enough, or if you fished it enough, you know what that is and what it is. So it's what we were doing is some of us would work up in the guts, some of us would work out in the middle of the grass areas and the flats, and then work the edges out there, especially as the water was beginning to flow and move out, and that water was dropping as that moon went down. You could see how the bait would kind of transition or move just a little bit deeper water, a little bit subtler, more subtle, deeper water. So I'd throw that jerk shrimp out there and just work that around those grass beds on the edges of that. And we would be very productive with that, catching all different kinds of in sizes of fish. Redfish of all different sizes, trout, different sizes as well. Pull out a flounder every so often. Of course, our flounder more came from in the guts that were closer to the shoreline in the back lake mouths as we did out there on the front, but it was productive. So, and that's the thing, when you get out here and you fish these areas and these different baits, whether you use the style baits that I use, or if you have your own particular flavor of baits and styles that you like and what you want, it's okay. Fine, throw it. You won't know until you do throw. So that's the thing, is work these areas, be productive with it. The back lake mouths, as you get up here to Jaybird Point, all the way up and around down to Sherman's, all that area there, with our water temperatures starting to warm back up really well, especially after the colder air that came in at Christmas time. We rebounded nicely. As we're getting into water in the mornings, it's 66, 67 degrees, and by the time we're getting off the water, it's 70, 71. So that's really nice, and it's almost kind of getting these fish somewhat into a little bit of a springtime pattern. Now, if these water temps hold for a couple of more weeks into that time frame and that temperature wise, then yeah, you'll probably can start finding those fish in that springtime pattern. But I would anticipate probably some more cold fronts that will be pushing down that will keep that water temp in that mid to low 60s more than likely. So unless we just have a really unusual weather pattern that hits us and stays on top of us for a while. But again, working these areas, working the deeper guts has been very productive. Working the smaller profile baits has been very productive for us, especially during the full moon period. Paying attention to what the tides have been doing has been critical. So we've been able to fish over the grass beds up shallow early because of the water temp, number one, and the depth of the water, number two, how much water's in here. And as that water begins to flow out of here, as that lower tide begins, then we start dropping off into the deeper guts, trying to find those fish, get concentrated in those areas. Again, majors and minors have been productive for us. Smaller profile baits have been productive for us. Just pay attention to what your water temps are doing and continue to locate bait and structure. Up here in North Pass, Mission Bay area, again with the higher tides that we've had in the mornings with this big moon in place, these areas around this mouth up here where you got a little bit of a gut, you got shell that works in here off to the left-hand side, you've got shell that works in here off the point and off to the right-hand side. So we've worked around these areas. The wading up in this area here is pretty good. You got a nice, pretty solid bottom that you can work. You got scattered mud in here, but again, as you get further back this way, as you get into the Mission Bay on the cliffs on the right-hand side or the north side of it, be careful with that. That mud is super soft, and it's primarily something that you'll probably want to fish from the boat from there. But if you get back there by the Mission River on that back shoreline and get into Mission Lake, that back shoreline is very wadeable. You can fish in and around the river that dumps into that. We haven't had major rains any time in the past few weeks, so there's not a lot of fresh water that's blowing through all that, but there's some active fish that are in and around that with that current coming around there with the bait working that's back in that. Of course, the one thing you have to be aware of is duck hunters. There are a bunch of duck hunters that are still out there in that area back here. There are a few there, so just be aware. If you see the duck blinds or know where they're at, just look for the decoys in and around that, and that'll let you know if you got duck participants that are back in those areas. But if you can get into there, it can be productive for you. The redfish have been pretty prevalent back in this area here. We haven't caught many trout from that area, but the redfish have been good and a few scattered flounder. The one thing that the back in this water here, with it being just a tad bit dirtier or stained, the one particular bait that we saw that was most productive was the burner shad in the Purple Rain. 16th ounce jig head, just bouncing that thing along or swimming it, either way, seemed to, redfish and flounder alike, both seem to really react to it, positively. So we throw a different color, same profile size, it wouldn't be as good. It was almost a 4-to-1 catch ratio with the Purple Rain. So, everybody that was there, and any time that we were in this particular estuary or any of the water that was particularly the same color and stain, we would throw the Purple Rain and be very productive with it. So some days it's that way. Some days they want a particular color and profile size, and that's in those few days that we were back in here, that's what they wanted, so that's what they got. So again, if you pay attention to what the fish are doing and what they're really reacting to, they'll dictate to you what they want if you'll just pay attention to it, and then you can kind of zero in and get the size and color that they really want and what they're reacting to, so it can be very productive. Again, the water levels dropping out in the afternoons, we would fish different areas, a little bit deeper water that would allow us those fish to concentrate into there. Early mornings, we'd fish edges, get up in a little bit shallower water so we could find, with grass beds, the fish are holding specifically, depending on what kind of wind that we had. Some days we'd have a light northward breeze and it would switch back around to the south. One thing that we did notice in and around those grass beds is those fish were all holding on the leeward side depending on which way the wind was blowing. So that was one thing we also noticed there. So we'd throw the Purple Rain, throw it on the leeward side of the grass bed or a gut with the water flowing through that, and that's where our production would come from. So it was pretty cool to really kind of zero in on that and watch it all take place. Again, majors and minors, very key during this time of year. Make sure that you're locating a bait source, paying attention to what your tides are doing and what the weather's going to be doing moving forward.